Good morning, church. Youth Director here. Hope you guys are having a good day today. Today's devotional is going to be on the topic of pride. Scriptures are very explicit on the effects of pride, the damaging effects of pride, the destruction of pride. It's all throughout the Bible, and we see these effects. So it's something to take seriously and not to take lightly. In Proverbs chapter 26, verse 12, I'll read it real quick. It says, "Do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him." This is a very eye-opening verse because it's actually comparing a fool to someone, even a Christian, whose heart is completely festered with pride. It's contaminated with pride, and the scripture says that there's more hope for a fool than for this man, which should cause us to really do some self-examination in our life to see if we can recognize any forms of pride, because pride actually has many forms. It's not just one or two. The number is endless. But pride actually has many levels. It can start off very small in our life and very mild to the point where we can barely recognize it in our life. And especially if we don't have somebody in our life, like maybe a spouse or a fellow believer, a friend, or a community of believers who can identify the effects of pride in our life. It can be really hard to identify it ourselves and more or less get rid of it. One of these mild forms that pride can take in our hearts is when we encounter obstacles and we encounter suffering in our life. Essentially, we have two choices. We can either take it before God and expose this sin before God, or we can go and do our own thing. What our mind wants to do is to think, you know what, I can handle this on my own. I can do this on my own. I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it. And if it gets really bad, then I'll take it before God. We like to wait and prolong the effects of pride in our heart before we take it to God. But sin, being destructive by nature, is not just going to want to stay in its mild form. It wants to multiply itself, especially this sin of pride. It wants more of itself in the life of the believer. And a lot of times what we as believers like to do is we like to prolong its effects, or we like to wait before we take it to God. So for example, if pride is in my heart and it's manifested in the effects of anger towards my spouse or to my children, that is something that needs to be dealt with right then and there. It needs to be taken before God in prayer, and I need to come before God and lay it before Him and say, God, this is something that's in my heart that maybe is showing itself in some small forms, but I want to deal with it now. I don't want to let it just sit there and wait till it gets worse before I bring it to you, because that's literally the effects of pride. Is pride thinks, you know what, I can do this on my own. I don't need God right now, but I may need Him later on down the road. But right now I don't need Him. Right now I can handle it the way I want to handle it, and I don't need to take it before God right now. So pride is destructive, but it's also deceiving by nature, because now we're starting to think on our own account. We're thinking on our own knowledge and our own capabilities that I can do this on my own and I don't need God right now. Sadly enough, this is actually very evidential in the heart of a believer. And the enemy likes to use pride to not just affect your life, but affect those that are around you, because pride can just lead into so many other different sins. So I want to encourage you today to really do some self-examination in your heart, and to think if you are considering things on your own ability or your own power, your own knowledge, that those are small effects of pride. They're small symptoms of pride in your heart. And I would encourage you not to wait to take it before God and say, you know what, these are small forms in my heart that I'm starting to recognize right now. I want to bring it before you, and I want you to cleanse me and wash me of this pride in my heart, because I don't want it to multiply, because pride wants more of itself, and I don't want this to just sit there and fester and to get worse and manifest itself in different ways. But we as believers, when we identify these small, mild, maybe minute forms of sin in our hearts, or when somebody identifies it for us, we need to put our pride aside and not say, you know what, I can do this on my own. No, we need to bring it before God, because we understand, as the scriptures show us, the severity of sin, and that sin is not to be taken lightly, especially the sin of pride, because it was pride in the beginning of time that caused man to fall. So I'm pretty sure the enemy is going to consistently use the same card over and over and over again in the life of the believer, and especially within the four walls of a church. So again, I would encourage you to take this time to do some self-examination in your heart to see if there's any trace amounts of pride, and maybe even ask your spouse or ask somebody who's also grounded in the things of God, if they can if they have identified any attitude of pride in your heart. Um, Again, another effect of pride is that we can do these things on our own, and we don't need the help of anybody else. That is a very terrible form of pride. And if you're thinking that way, then that's a clear indication that you really do need to ask somebody, somebody that you can trust, that's grounded in the things of God. Hey, is there anything in me? Is there any attitude in me? Or is there anything that's been manifested through my actions or through my words that shows that there's the sin of pride in my heart? If there is, can you pray with me? Or if there is, can you gather a group of believers so that we can come together and pray? Because I don't want this to multiply in my heart. We just need to recognize that Scripture treats sin at its complete and extreme form, and that it's destructive. So we need to not take it lightly of these small trace amounts of pride in our heart. We need to take it before God in prayer, because He's the only one that can rid us of this sin. So I would hope that would encourage you guys today to just really do some self-examination in your heart, and to employ the experience of other believers to identify these things in your life as well. So I hope you guys have been blessed today.